Another interesting episode of Environment Matters, and we are reaching you from the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. On this episode of Environment Matters, we look at the presentation of Nigeria's national statement by the Minister of Environment, Mohammed Abdullahi, on behalf of President Muhammadu Buhari.
Now it's my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Muhammad Hassan Abdullah, Minister of Environment of Nigeria. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I present the statement of His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and the Chairman, Conference of Head of States and Government of Pan-African Great Green Wall. Mr. President, on behalf of Nigeria and its delegation, I congratulate you on your election as President of the 27th session of the Conference of Parties to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and assure you of Nigeria's full support as we lead our deliberations. At COP26, I did say that for Nigeria, climate change is not about the perils of tomorrow, but what is happening today. Today, Nigeria is currently grappling with devastating effects of terrible flooding, which has affected 3.2 million persons. Over 600 lives lost, over 100,000 persons displaced, and over 300 hectares of farmlands destroyed. Nigeria, and indeed the rest of Africa, from the Sahara to the Cape, is living with increasing fear of food insecurity as a result of the floods. The economic cost for loss and damage for Africa is estimated at almost United States dollars 2 trillion, excluding non-economic losses. Developed nations must not ignore the demand from developing nations to establish a loss and damage finance facility to help developing nations recover from the adverse effect of climate change, particularly the devastating floods, worsening desertification, and rising sea levels. At COP26 in Glasgow, I announced Nigeria's commitment to net zero by 2060 on the basis of a detailed energy transition plan. This plan, the first of its kind in Africa, highlights the significant scale of resources required to attain both development and climate ambitions by 2060. However, the public finance urgently needed to fund energy transitions and climate action is lacking, a situation compounded by debt distress affecting many low and middle-income countries. We are therefore taking bold steps to pioneer innovative climate finance instruments, such as debt for climate swaps, and championing the development of the African Carbon Market Initiative. In support of this, Nigeria has enacted the Climate Change Law, alongside the initial governance framework, and launched the Nigeria Emission Trading Scheme. To signal investment readiness, we have made significant progress in creating the enabling policies and incentives to advance a short list of priority projects, including renewable solar independent power plant, scaled decentralized renewable energy projects, and gas-fired commercialization opportunities, to name a few. We are hopeful that investors and the global community will recognize the immense investment opportunities and potential for support. Mr. President, as the largest economy in Africa, we are engaging the G7 to request the inclusion of Nigeria in the G7's climate partnership list for the co-creation of a just energy transition partnership. Nigeria and the rest of Africa call for an effective and sustainable framework that will address the socio-economic effects of energy transition, including energy poverty, loss of jobs and livelihoods. Finally, Africa contributes about 3% to the global emissions, but is left to cope with the devastating impacts of climate change. Nigeria has spearheaded initiatives aimed at recovering degraded land for Sahara and the Sahel, such as the Great Green Wall. There is a dire need to expand existing adaptation acceleration programs for developing countries. I thank you for listening to Mr. President.
On Environment Matters as well, we are going to take a look at the African Ministers Conference on Environment position prior negotiations at COP27. And then we look at Nigeria's exclusive side event hosted in partnership with Belize on transparency in collaboration with the Initiative for Transparency for Climate Action, which underscores the role of transparency in the fight against climate change. Just as the world, especially developing countries, make a case for financing for their various climate action plans.
This COP for implementation for Africa, we're glad that the COP presidency has also put adaptation at the highest priority of that COP, especially for Africa. We're glad that on Friday there was the announcement of the operationalization of the Africa Adaptation Initiative, which was born earlier in 2015, where some funds would go to that initiative in order to operationalize that from Egypt. The purpose of that initiative is to accelerate the funding for projects in Africa, as well as the work that has been done through the UNECA and the climate champion of Egypt for the pipeline of different projects that would be implemented. Also, to continue the discussion on loss and damage and the impact for Africa, as well as the land degradation and biodiversity, which are two important issues related to climate that we're putting high also on the agenda on the Biodiversity Day next Wednesday. We look forward to the unity of the continent and for honorable ministers to come and speak with one voice for that COP, so that all the needs and the demands for our children and future generation would be met, or at least partially met within the COP of implementation in a very critical year.
Nigeria will align itself with the African position. We are not going to take a know-it-all position. And that is exactly why we're here at the level of African Ministers of Environment to meet, to harmonize these positions, especially focusing on loss and damage. Of course, we are quite aware of the devastating flood we have in Nigeria and other parts of the continent. So basically, Nigeria is focused on those priorities of loss and damage, on climate finance, and of course on biodiversity conservation. So we're on course, we're aligning ourselves with the African position.
Our area of interest is to make sure that Africa is united under a common voice umbrella. We know that there are bottlenecks around us. We are emitting the least, but again, we have been disadvantaged by the impact of climate change. But the most important thing is not to only bend on our differential impacts, but also to have a common voice to confront the negotiation when it comes to climate on the loss and damages. That is what is more important. We understand that Africa is getting around 3% from the global basket when it comes to the finance. Now the target is we want to at least spread our arms to see whether we can reach up to 10%. Yes, still it's a small one compared to what we are emitting and what we are being exposed to when it comes to the loss and damage. But again, it's better that we move from the 3, which is very, very minute, to reach as far as 10%. So what our main purpose is to speak one voice, to consolidate our gains and make sure that at least we have a united common purpose in terms of our agenda to mitigate and build on our adaptation mechanisms on the resilience part.
But transparency goes much further. It's also critical in engaging stakeholders that you will need for effective implementation. It's key to design the policies that you want to be effective and based on evidence. It's then critical when you assess the impacts of policies to make sure that they are in line with national priorities. That of course applies to climate-related priorities, but very much also for development-related priorities, and that's where also the topic of just transitions comes in, which is a new feature of the work that we are supporting from ICA. And last but not least, transparency is critical in mobilizing finance.
Nigeria, as part of the transparency drive, has submitted 3 national communications, the latest being from March 2020, and its first biennial update report was in March 2018. As a signatory to the Paris Agreement, we have also submitted an ambitious updated NDC commitment in July 2021. The updated NDC commits Nigeria to reduce emissions by 20% unconditionally and can scale up to 47% with international support. The NDC has updated, has also mainstreamed gender across the sectors based on the National Action Plan on Gender and Climate Change. Beyond the Paris Agreement, Nigeria has committed to a net zero emissions by 2060, in line with the Global Energy Transition Plan and the long-term low-emission development strategy. As part of Nigeria's transparency enhancement effort, the country's GHG emissions assessment has been expanded to cover 11 pollutants in total, including short-lived climate pollutants. ICAT is supporting Nigeria in the implementation of a robust MRV system towards transparent reporting of climate actions through capacity building among key MRV stakeholders to effectively discharge their roles and responsibilities. The European Union is also supporting a project in Nigeria to develop an MRV system in 2 other sectors of electricity and waste. ICAT is again graciously supporting a phase 2 project in Nigeria to develop an MRV institutional arrangement for an outstanding industry sector, which was not covered by the phase 1 project. A project cooperation agreement to that effect has just been signed by both parties to commence implementation. The project will support Nigeria in assessing, tracking, and reporting the impact of the implementation of policies and measures on environment, socio-economic, and sustainable development goals in the country.
We have carried out a comprehensive climate finance landscape study for Belize with a detailed analysis of climate finance amounts, sources, instruments, and sectors to identify our strengths, our weaknesses, challenges, and opportunities in accessing climate finance. It supports us a lot to make informed decisions about climate finance. But we also consider this as a voluntary effort to communicate widely on climate finance related matters to all the stakeholders while upholding the principles of transparency. Based on the climate finance landscape assessment, we have developed climate finance strategy to guide our pathways to access climate finance in an integrated and strategic manner. It is also a proactive step for us to make informed decisions on finance while communicating to others our intended stance towards climate finance. Belize is committed to strengthening its climate finance access and transparency-related aspects and showcasing our commitments toward climate action.
Several activities were hosted at the Nigerian pavilion by ministries, departments, and agencies, including development partners. The Nigeria Energy Transition Plan was a key pavilion event at COP27. This brought together stakeholders to look at the processes and the progress made as far as Nigeria's energy transition plan is concerned and how to ramp more support to implement that plan.
Now, the plan itself actually highlights the need to deploy solar capacity at an unprecedented scale, amounting to about 5.3 gigawatts of additional capacity every year till 2060, as well as highlighting the important role that natural gas will continue to play as a transition oil, as a transition fuel, both for power, but also clean cooking, and also to establish base load capacity on the grid. Now, it's important to also highlight the fact that the plan reflects a vision for Nigeria to kind of industrialize, right, through low carbon technologies. A plan that helps us fill out the streets with electric mobility, to power healthcare centers and schools with renewable energy. But to achieve this goal, we have to marry our climate aspirations with a pipeline of robust projects. And I think this is sort of the context of this discussion.
Really outlined the $23 billion worth of projects that will underpin the $10 billion ETP. And so we're hoping to communicate to the global community that we are a country of action and that the projects we have are valid, they can be made bankable if they're not bankable already, and that we can really join hands to make those commitments from the international community to support the developing economies as well as Nigeria with that 100 billion that has been so evasive, that can be crystallized into true monies that are going to support Nigeria in that transition.
It is essentially the model that has been packaged by the Nigerian government that carries both the public sector and the private sector, so that in our march towards renewables, in our march towards our net zero emission commitment by 2060. So we're here with Nigerian experts, with people from the private sector themselves to market it to the global community.
As a follow-up to this particular side event that we've had, the minister was also represented by the DG at the United States Center. If you do recall, Senator John Kerry was also in Nigeria to sign the Clean Energy Demand Initiative. That initiative is an initiative that aligns very well with the Energy Transition Plan, because the Energy Transition Plan has a number of key deliverables. Two of them are directly linked to the SEDI, which is a Clean Energy Development Initiative. That is, to be able to sign between 3 to 5 agreements with original equipment manufacturers for the gas as well as for the other energy infrastructure, for them to be able to come to Nigeria to set up shop, to set up factories for manufacturing and also for transfer of the relevant technology. And the second one is to provide an opportunity for Nigeria to sign 1 or 2 agreements on capacity building and institutional strengthening for the power sector.
Also at the Nigerian pavilion, the ministries of youth and sport and that of humanitarian affairs, disaster management and social development interfaced with the global community to look at the place of youth in climate action, as well as the humanitarian perspective to climate change in the country.
Usually we always come with all these bright ideas on papers, we come in with promises, but at the next COP you see that the implementation is very poor. So I'm hoping that this COP will give more emphasis to action rather than just words. And for Nigeria, for example, I know the youth population constitute the majority of the Nigerian population, and the youth therefore have the strong awareness towards helping the country in achieving a low emissions and carbon resilient society.
Youth is the future, they say, but youth is now. We are all aware of the impact of climate change all around the world. The evidence here in Nigeria with the flooding, extreme temperature, extreme weather condition. So the youth have now scaled up their engagements in negotiation, in providing their input in policy development, and that is what's key right now.
Project 250K. Project 250K. That is, we're going to work with our youth, 250,000 youth across the country. We already have global partners to plant 250,000 trees. And it's so programmed in such a way that not just planting, but the post-planting, to nurture it. Every tree that is planted, we expect that you get 1 extra ambassador. You tell another youth about the tree you planted. So it's Project 250K. We hope to end up with.
The Nigerian government, through the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, is scaling up climate change adaptation in Nigeria so as to build community resilience and adaptation practices to mitigate and reduce the consequence of climate change. The government's response to climate change adaptation has thus far focused through our ministry on policy reviews and planning, notably the 2019 Disaster Risk Management policy that was developed by the National Emergency Management Agency, which calls for mainstreaming disaster risk reduction in all areas, including climate change an environmental factor as indicated in the policy priority 4.
States, ministries, departments, agencies had their engagement as well at the Nigerian pavilion, highlighting different roles and their own particular roles they play in Nigeria's general climate ambition and climate action initiative.
We are hoping that the UNFCCC, the IPCC, and discussions at this COP27 will prepare towards centralizing the question of the deltas in COP28 in Dubai next year. We hope that not only us, but there are other people that stay in deltas. Island countries are being considered. Countries in coastal areas, oceanic countries, which we also belong, oceanic people are considered. But not much is spoken about the deltas, where all the waters from all the rivers enter into. So our expectation is that this will be a major issue in future COP meetings.
The National Population Commission, for instance, launched a Green Census initiative, which underscores the role of data for financing climate activities and engaging Nigerians, segregating core sectors and core areas of interest for the nation's climate action initiative and plans.
The only body in Nigeria that touches or comes into contact with every Nigerian since we visit them in their homes. We thought we should seize the opportunity and collect data on all sectors, including the environment, the climate change. So that's why we've taken this bold step. Adopting the digital technology alone is saving Nigeria, is earning Nigeria some carbon credits.
The Nigeria Hydrocarbon Pollution Remediation Project, HYPREP, also told the world the progress made in the Ogoni cleanup exercise, while NOSDRA has opportunity to meet with critical stakeholders to look at opportunities for responding promptly to oil spill and, of course, avoiding those activities that often degrade Nigeria's environment.
Mangroves are known as tropical plants that have 5 times the capacity of sequestering, removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, 5 times more than any other tropical plant. And so by restoring eco-sanctuaries, mangrove eco-sanctuaries, and replanting mangroves, we are actually contributing our own quota at mitigation of impacts of climate change. As at the moment, 2 million seedlings of mangroves is our first target of replanting. In the first project area, over 415,000 seedlings have already been planted. What this means is that we have also created green jobs. A lot of people now begin to actually subsist on raising mangrove nurseries.
That's it on this episode of the program. My name is Onenge Fantis. Thank you for joining me on Environment Matters.